The desert stretched endlessly under a dying sun, its crimson light spilling across the horizon like a bleeding wound. Dust clung to every breath, and the rhythmic clop of a horse's hooves was the only sound breaking the silence. Luke Carter's vision blurred as the world swayed before him. His arm burned where the bullet had torn through, blood soaking his sleeve. His heartbeat thundering louder than the hooves beneath him. He had fought through gunfire, through betrayal, and through the kind of pain that would drop most men where they stood, but Luke wasn't most men. He had promised her he'd come back, and that promise was the only thing keeping him in the saddle. The town lights flickered faintly in the distance, like candles calling a soul home, and he whispered to his horse, "Just a bit more, boy. Just a bit more." By the time he reached the cabin on the edge of town, his strength was gone. The door swung open before he could even call out. Emily stood there, her dress simple, her hair in braids, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. She ran to him, catching him just as he slid from the horse. "Luke!" she cried, her voice trembling. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Told you. I'd come back." And then the world went dark. When he woke, the scent of herbs and firewood filled the room. The cabin's walls glowed softly in the lantern light, and the sound of a crackling fire hummed in the background. Emily was sitting beside him, gently pressing a wet cloth to his forehead. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes, those soft blue eyes, were steady. "You're lucky that bullet missed your heart," she whispered, dabbing his brow. He tried to push himself up, but she placed a firm hand on his chest. "Don't even think about it. Cowboy." Her voice was stern, but her touch was gentle. He wanted to argue, to tell her there were men out there still, hunting him, but the words caught in his throat. Outside, the night wind howled against the wooden walls. Luke could almost hear the voices of his pursuers carried in that wind, cruel and restless. He'd crossed a man he shouldn't have, a ranch baron who owned more than just land, a man whose greed was matched only by his cruelty. Luke had ridden with that man once, worked his cattle, helped build his empire, until he saw what kind of devil he was serving. When Luke stood against him, the baron sent his guns after him. Luke had been running ever since. "Emily," Luke rasped, his voice low. "If they find me—" "They won't," she cut him off. "You're safe here. You don't understand. Her hand moved to his cheek, silencing him. "You've been fighting long enough. Let me do the worrying tonight." Her words settled over him like a blanket. Safe. He hadn't heard that word in years, not since before the war. Before the Baron, before the endless road of running and fighting and bleeding for every breath. He looked at her face, at the firelight dancing in her eyes, and something inside him softened. "You shouldn't have stayed here," he murmured. "You could have gone to your sister's farm, been safe yourself." "I told you I'd wait," she said simply, "and I don't break my word." Silence filled the space between them, soft, heavy, full of meaning. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, but inside, time seemed to stop. Emily rewrapped the bandage on his arm with practiced care, her fingers brushing his skin in ways that made his chest ache more than his wound. She wasn't just a caretaker. She was his anchor, the one thing that reminded him there was more to life than revenge and running. As the night deepened, Luke fought to stay awake. Every time his eyes closed, he saw flashes, gunfire in the canyon, the faces of men who had fallen, the rage of the Baron shouting over the storm. He gritted his teeth and tried to sit up again, sweat beading on his forehead. Emily leaned forward, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Luke, please. You need rest." "I can't." "If I sleep, they'll come," he whispered hoarsely. "They won't," she said, voice breaking slightly. "I've locked the doors. I've loaded your rifle. You're safe, I promise." He shook his head weakly. "You don't know them. They don't stop." Her eyes filled with tears then, the first he'd ever seen from her. "And neither do you. You've fought enough. You're home now, Luke. You made it back to me. That's all that matters." He looked at her for a long moment, the firelight flickering between them. Then she leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. "You're safe. Sleep now." Those words hit him harder than any bullet. They tore through the walls he'd built inside himself. Through the years of fear and solitude, for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to believe her. His breathing slowed. The tension in his shoulders eased. He felt her hand in his hair, soft and warm, and a peace he hadn't known since boyhood wrapped around him. The cowboy who'd fought through wars, storms, and gunfire finally closed his eyes and let go. Emily sat beside him long after he drifted off, watching the firelight dance across his face. Outside, dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. For the first time in years, Luke slept without fear. The battle was over, at least for now. And as the sun rose, Emily whispered into the quiet morning, "You'll never fight alone again." Sometimes heroes don't wear badges or ride into glory. They just survive long enough to find someone who tells them it's okay to rest.